wanted to ask you all. There is, for this younger generation of preacher and minister, this idea, they would want to jump and be the next such and such, the next such and such, to have a big church, nice car, clothes, and all that. And many times, education, theological education, is not even a part of the equation, and some pastors would say is not even necessary for young ministers to be educated. What are your thoughts on that?
Black people have always valued education, even during the time of slavery. Some of our most accomplished leaders, whether it was for things that are lauded and applauded or things that are condemned, were highly educated. Nat Turner, Gabriel Prosser, Denmark Vesey. These were the people in the slave community who could read. These were the people who were gifted. And people have always had a respect for that in the black community and in the black church. Now there's also another strand, where there's a certain, you see, when we speak of the black church, we recognize that we're not talking about everybody being the same and that kind of thing. I mean, there are strands of black church practices and black religion and that kind of thing. And we've always had those who were skeptical of education, and maybe rightly so, because our education needs to be used for liberation and transformation. Our education needs to be used to advance our own people and our own community, not against us and not against one another. Okay, my education, even as a professor, it is designed to help advance our students and to make them more knowledgeable and more understanding of what's going on around them, as well as to help them understand themselves and the church and their culture and all of that kind of thing. So, if I'm not doing that, then in a very real sense, I have failed as an educator. It is not to sit back and laud my own education. What good is that? It is to help others and to let them know that that all of us can advance. If one of us can advance, all of us can do the exact same thing. I think that for those, you have to keep in mind now, we're not saying that education is a panacea. And we're not saying that education is more important, let's say, than some other things, such as faith and so forth. But, I mean, going back to St. Anselm, I mean, our faith is a faith that seeks understanding, which is, again, highly correlated with education. So I believe in a practical education. In other words, I believe that our education has to be practical, that is pragmatic, has to have a use. And that use is to help advance the kingdom of God and advance black people in the world and in our culture and society. So when we use education for those kind of purposes, I think that God smiles on that kind of thing. Now, if our education is just for self-aggrandizement, then hey, that's not the kind of education that I'm supporting or advancing, you see. And I think that anybody who tells young people that they don't need to be educated and you're going to try to be the pastor of a church or the leader of a group of black people, okay, I think that that perspective and philosophy needs to be condemned and discouraged, for sure. And like I say in my classes, and I say now, people think that I'm joking about it, but I'm really not, that those preachers who don't take their education seriously, those who don't take reading and studying seriously, okay, should almost be banned from the church. Maybe even taken behind the church and beaten with many stripes.
Yeah, I think part of this business of the belief that maybe education is unnecessary. You have a lot of preachers, for example, who have very successful ministries, and they have not been to a seminary or any place. They probably got their degrees from here or there, which I care not to elaborate on at this point. It's a part of that tradition in the black world. It was, people used to say, what degree you have? Say, I have a BA degree, and that is a born-again degree. See, and this has now come over in another form. See, it just moves from generation to generation and generation, and then it comes in this form now. We don't need this. I think what we need is a critical education that will help us to confront the issues that we face, and sort of be involved in some sense a new creation, a new generation of people. We have large congregations of people, and they believe certain things in those congregations. And if you came through with something that they are not used to, well, you might get a chance to speak to one of those congregations, but you won't speak there many times because of the fact that they say this is not in line with what we believe here. And now most of what, in many instances, most of what is believed, there's no sound basis for any of that. And I think today we must try our very best to get persons who lead in congregations to understand that education is not a curse, but it is indeed a tool that can be used in order to bring people into wholeness and fullness again. It occurred to me that the person who wrote the Gospel of Matthew, at the beginning of that Gospel, as you recall, there is a statement about from this generation to that generation for 14 generations. From Babylonian exile to this time was another 14 generations, and from there to Jesus' time, another 14 generations. And you ask yourself, who wrote that? Who knew that? The priests knew it. Unfortunately, too many of us in the black church do not know where we have come from, do not know where we are. And if you don't know where you are, you don't know where to go. And for that reason, today, there are crowds, but sometimes the crowd is not of substance, I must say. As a seminary professor, I think that we need to do a better job in helping people to understand that education is not a curse, but a blessing to all persons. Now, I see this. If a lawyer to be legitimate, must do the course of law, a doctor the course of medicine, and all other people who do professional work within the community, and they go to school again and again and again, time after time after time, to keep up, then why so much in the church? Since we're trying to keep up with Jesus Christ, since we are believers in the biblical tradition, which basically says, study to show yourself approved as a workman of the Lord who needs not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Why is there so much anti-education? And talk about it is not necessary. Listen, you need an education to survive in this